Hi, I'm your host Patrick Bailey, and welcome back to the Love 'em or Lose 'em YouTube channel.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mark Bailey. I'm an attorney in the state of Michigan, and we're here to discuss issues involving a lot of common questions and common mistakes people make when they're about to go through a divorce or a breakup.
And Mark, a common question that we receive is if your significant other or your spouse wants to kick you out of the house. So why don't you tell us some rules in the state of Michigan that apply in this sort of situation?
Well, first of all, that's a tough question, but just generally speaking, parties when they're married or unmarried live in a home together, and they maybe lived in that home together for a long period of time. Maybe it's even a short period of time. The question really is what rights do you have? Because when somebody's about to go through a divorce, it's very common for the spouse to say, "Look, you need to leave." And the question is, do you? Because that's where you live. That's where your children may reside. That's where all of your clothing, all your personal effects are. Now, if there's a court order, which there rarely is, forcing you out, such as a personal protection order, yes, you have to leave, or otherwise you're going to get escorted off to jail by your police. But generally speaking, it's more of a request than a demand. And if you do that, if you move out, then you can give up some significant rights because sometimes it's hard to get back into the house and you sacrifice seeing your children perhaps, losing your belongings and so forth. And so it's a lot of times and most often it's not a good idea to move from your home.
Now, Mark, you mentioned a personal protection order or another court order. Most people are familiar with a personal protection order to keep someone safe, but what's another type of court order that might remove you from the home, and how does someone achieve that?
Well, sometimes people will file a divorce complaint, which really kicks in the jurisdiction of the courts to be able to tell you that you can or can't do certain things. It's rare, but it is possible that a party that files a divorce action could convince a judge by her own allegations or his own allegations that that person should leave the home. That rarely happens in a divorce action because courts recognize two things. One is that your home is pretty sacred and that's where you live. And secondly, they try not to make decisions on one person's say so. And they want to hear both sides of the stories before they take such a drastic action as kick somebody out of their home. A lot of times people think that if they do leave the home, they've abandoned the home or they've lost their rights and so forth. You do not have to get out of the home just because a spouse wants you to get out of the home. Of course, it'd be less stress and so forth, but there's oftentimes very significant financial consequences for a person moving out of the home because they're stuck with some of the bills in the home and then they're potentially stuck in with new bills in a new home, or they're living on somebody's couch, which obviously is not very ideal.
And if I were to get served with one of these court orders, do I have time to go back to the home and retrieve my personal belongings, or what is your recommendation with that?
Well, a personal protection order is certainly a more significant document. It gives the police the ability to enforce the order, and you can be jailed for a violation of an order. So if a personal protection order is served on you and it says you may not enter onto the premises located at such and such an address, you can't assume that it's okay just to go over there and to get your clothing and so forth. My recommendation would be to get an attorney, have your attorney contact the other attorney or file something in court that allows you either to rescind the personal protection order if it was granted under bogus or exaggerated circumstances, or at least allow an opportunity for you to go over and get your personal belongings and so forth. Don't assume that it's okay just to go over and do that because you could end up spending the night in jail. On a civil restraining order, which is the order that we talked about a little bit earlier, where the court in your divorce action has prevented you from going into the home, there are no arrest powers with that order. But that being said, you don't want to create a conflict by going over to the house. Next thing you know, police are going to get called and somebody's going to get carted off to jail. So always into these circumstances when there's an order, follow the order, get your attorney. The attorney will try to negotiate something where you're either allowed to go back into the house or rescind the order that's been wrongfully placed and that prevents you from being in your home.
Now, Mark, with 30 plus years experience and receiving numerous phone calls with this sort of situation. Can you give the viewers a real life situation that you've encountered that would apply the rules and the facts that you just went over?
Well, the real life situation that I get is that a lot of times I sit down with what we call an initial consultation, and somebody hasn't filed, but they're about to. Obviously, they come in and see me when things are looking their worst. And the problem that I run into is people make mistakes right out of the gate, like, oh, I assumed I had to move out. Now I want to move back in. That's too late. So the most common thing I hear, the most real life situation that I hear is, do I need to get out of the house? That person wants me to get out of the house. Do I need to leave? And the answer is almost always is no. And in fact, there are times when it's important. We've already discussed a few of those. But most of the time when you leave the home, you're going to have financial consequences, custody consequences that are negative. You won't be able to see your children. And so there really isn't a good reason to leave just because somebody wants you to. Now, if circumstances are lots of conflict, they're escalating, you can see where the situation may be getting out of control. There's situations that are involving the children. You may want to consider moving out, not because you have to, but just because it's the right thing to do. But again, I guess what I'm trying to stress here more so is that it's not, if one side wants you to get out, you don't have to do it. And 9 times out of 10, it's not in your best interest to get out. If you have to get out because of a court order, absolutely, follow the court order. If one side is just demanding that you get out, well, talk to us. Let us have an opportunity to explain to you what your rights are. Regardless of whose name is on the deed or whose name's on the loan, if you've been living in what we'd call the marital home, you have the right to remain there. That is your home. And again, I understand why people want that person to get out of the home, but it's not necessarily at all in your best interest to follow that demand, especially if it's not an order. If it is an order, you follow it. If it's a demand from a spouse, you may want to consider not following that order or not following that demand. That doesn't mean that you should sleep together. Maybe you look at different rooms. Maybe you obviously try to avoid conflict. If the circumstances are escalating, you can remove yourself, go over to a friend's home for the evening, go over into what I call a safe spot, whether that's your basement or out in the garage or wherever it turns out to be. De-escalate the circumstances, but don't move out.
Mark, I think you did an excellent job explaining the difference between whether there's a court order or just a request for you to move out, and the potential penalties that you'll face with moving out, and the potential penalties you'll face if you violate a court order. So thank you for watching today. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel, and tune in next week for our video with what happens if your spouse or significant other is withholding your child from you.
Take care.